Where would you like to start? Shall we start with what we've seen yesterday, the craziness that we saw yesterday in the committee?
Well, Tim, I think for me, and I do want to talk about what happened in the House Judiciary Committee with Pam Bondi because I was infuriated by it. But I think to get into that, for me, it's important to get into the context of where exactly we are, what we know and what we don't know, right? Because I was talking about it with folks that I work with at UCD, with students yesterday, and the whole challenge of covering cases like this is the white noise that's on top of this, because there's so much disinformation, so much in terms of lies and diversions that go out there. And it's like, okay, as a journalist or as an analyst, you got to get back to the basic facts. So where are the facts? We're just under 2 weeks away from what was the biggest document dump of the Epstein files, which was about 2.7 million pages that the Trump folks released. And as a reminder, remember, they were supposed to release all the Epstein files in December. That was a deadline they didn't meet, whether it's because they didn't want to meet it or whether it's just the sheer volume of files. But they released about half of the files 2 weeks ago. There's still about 3 million pages that they have not released that are out there. Now, the thing that's striking about that 2 weeks ago is it was the largest release of Epstein files at that point. And for me, it was also the biggest cover up to date, because what had happened is when they released these files on a Friday afternoon, and of course, when you drop something that you really don't want journalists to get a handle on, you drop it on a Friday because journalists just want to go home for the weekend, right?
That's
So
a
you just throw it.
classic trick, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a classic trick. And so everybody's screaming. And of course, there was no catalog. There's no cataloging. There's no index. You could type in search terms, but there was no real guide through this files that you had to. So, you can imagine what it's like if you all of a sudden just a whole shed load of paper showed up in your front room and you're just digging through to try to figure out what the heck it was. But what was striking to me already at that point, while I said they were covering up, is not just the fact that they had not released 3 million pages. That of the 2.7 million that they had released, there were a hell of a lot of redactions. There were entire documents that were blacked out. But then the capper for me was over the weekend, the Trump folks sent out a guy named Todd Blanche to do the PR on this. Now, it's interesting, by the way, they did not send out Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, because she had screwed up some public appearances, including a previous congressional hearing last autumn. And also, she's the one that had said, a year ago, last February, I've got them here. I've got all the files right here. They're all coming out. So they sent Todd Blanche out, who was Donald Trump's lawyer, personal lawyer, including during the felony cases in 2024. And now he's Deputy Attorney General. So he's not there as an independent representative, providing for an independent Justice Department, to provide security for Americans. He's there as Trump's guy, just as Bondi is effectively a Trump servant. And Blanche comes out and he does a press conference, then he does the Sunday talk shows, and his line, the effective on the line was, whatever documents we withheld, national security, to protect victims, to protect witnesses, we can do that. But the ones that you've got, these establish, he says, there's nothing here that indicates that Donald Trump is involved in any crime. There's no reason to prosecute Trump. Point blank, right? So he's prejudged already. Then he says, this is what got me, there's no reason to prosecute anybody. He just absolved everybody at that point. Now, the reason why that struck, Tim, is that there had been a document in the, because we got a drip feed of files back in December. And there had been a document that had come out then that there were at least 10 potential co-conspirators who Justice Department were trying to contact. In other words, effectively were trying to notify them, you may be facing prosecution here, right? Now, this was just after Epstein had died that they're pursuing this. So I know that there was enough in 2019 that people did think that there were possible prosecutions that would be on the cards. Now, the document did not identify who those 10, at least 10 potential co-conspirators were. It gave locations, somewhere in Florida, somewhere in New York, somewhere in other states. I also knew that there were documents which were withheld and were held in December, and then they were withheld in the big document dump that also were vital to establishing, okay, what could we know about Epstein's crimes, the extent of Epstein's crimes? And just to run through them very quickly, the 2007 indictment of Epstein, which is the Florida case, has not been released. The charging paper, which gives the reasons for the indictment in Florida, not released. This was the case where he eventually plea bargained and pleaded guilty to soliciting sex from a 17-year-old. Right? The 2019 New York case, that the documents behind that prosecution, including that could lead to co-conspirators, had not come out. At least I hadn't seen it, right? Now, these are very, very important documents here. Now, let me give you the twist in the tale, because I hope you see where I'm building on this, because I'm focusing on the co-conspirators here. I did an interview with Times Radio with Trump Report last Monday, and I went through this. Oh, sorry, by the way, the big thing, Tim, that has not come out, I'm sorry, before I tell the story, the 302s. The victims, the survivors, I should say, are saying our 302 statements have not been released. Now, FBI 302s are records of field investigations. They are interviews with victims, they're interviews with witnesses, they may be other evidence which they're processing, right? And the victims are saying, our 302s aren't in there, right? So we do not have transparency, implying we told the FBI that there's more here than is being than the Justice Department is acknowledging. So where are our 302s? And that, by the way, will come up when we talk about the Bondi hearing yesterday. That's one of the reasons why you had, I think, at least 11 survivors or relatives of survivors who were in that audience, that we have not seen our testimony come out yet. So the 302s are vital. But let me go back to that 85, 86-page document around the New York case, right? In July of 2019, so Epstein is about to face conviction. He gets convicted, he's facing conviction, and then eventually, of course, winds up dead. That 86-page document was briefly uploaded to the Justice Department website in the document dump less than 2 weeks ago. But then it disappeared a few hours later. I found out about this because I was talking to Times Radio on Monday. And I mentioned it. I said, look, where's the document of the co-conspirators? And one of the commenters said, Midas Touch, an organization that I have a great deal of respect for, Midas Touch got a hold of the document before it was withdrawn, and they've uploaded it. And sure enough, they have. And so I recommend anybody go to Midas, Midas Touch or its parent organization, Midas, and you can see. And I read the document in full. And if you don't mind me explaining why this is important here is that this is a record of interviews with some of the victims, with some of the witnesses, and it includes an interview with a woman named Virginia Giuffre. Now, Virginia Giuffre is the woman who perhaps is best known because she was the first person to come out and talk about Andrew, formerly known as Prince, saying that she was sexually abused by him while she was underage. And of course, there's the photo of Giuffre and Andrew, which many of your viewers may have seen. But Giuffre's testimony to the FBI goes well beyond this. She names other names, right? She names one of the names that that came out yesterday that was unredacted. Came out a couple days ago. It was unredacted when those handful of Congress legislators were able to see the documents that had been released, and they were unredacted in some cases. Mm-hmm. And one of the 6 names that came out that was unredacted is a guy named Les Wexner. Now, Les Wexner is a big retail giant. I mean, Abercrombie and Fitch, Victoria's Secret are among the businesses that he's got. I think he's got Bed Bath & Beyond as well. And the allegation is Wexner, who was a longtime friend of Epstein's, was involved in the abuse of these women. She also names, I want to be careful here. The name is public, Tim, but I don't want to get you in trouble. She also names a name which did not come out yesterday of a prominent New
Mm.
York hedge fund manager, and I mean a billionaire, who is also a prominent art collector. Um, and I have checked that name. And what's interesting is that it checks out that Virginia Giuffre also had named this person as well as others in 2016 when she was considering filing civil action for damages.
Yeah.
So I knew, first of all, when I saw that 86-page document, which talked about people who might have been involved with Epstein, that there were people against whom cases could have been made, right? And not just for involvement in Epstein's financial crimes, but involvement in the pedophilia. I also knew why that document was withdrawn fairly quickly. It should not have gotten onto that site because the information was pretty damning. And I also know this. I do know, however, at that document, I think I know why the FBI did not proceed with prosecuting in 2019. And that is, and I'm going to let your viewers weigh this up as well as others, they didn't believe Virginia Giuffre.
Yeah. I was about to
They
say, I mean,
they
she
they go
took
in,
her own life as well, so that which is really
yeah,
horrendous.
and they go into detail. They go into detail where, and we can check out the claims they make where she exaggerated, where she supposedly distorted, and do that. But we can go through and investigate that. But the fundamental here is the FBI did not believe her. Now, again, I'm going to go back to the 302s now, which is important. Did the FBI believe the other survivors?
Mm.
Did they believe the other survivors? And we've got no idea whether or not they did. I'm going to refer to one other document, if you don't mind, Tim, and then I'll build up
Sure, yeah,
to
go.
what Bondi said yesterday.
Mm.
You know, there's thousands of references to Trump in the big document dump from less than 2 weeks ago, right? But the thing is, if Trump's mentioned in a newspaper article that Jeffrey Epstein had collected, then that counts as a reference. If there is a discussion of Trump's campaign, say in 2015, that counts as a reference. So just saying Trump is mentioned thousands of times doesn't give us an indication of, the significance of that reference. From the documents that have come out, and there may be more to come out, but I think people have gone through quite a few now. Um, there's only one that gets Trump into really potential hot water. And that is that in 2025, for reasons that are not clear, but I think I could speculate on why, the FBI does a summary document, a 2-page document of tips that they received in previous years and what they did to follow up on the tips, right? Now, it is important to note that simply having a tip to the FBI doesn't mean that an event occurred because it's unverified. Anybody can call in and make a claim. But amongst those tips that are there are a number which are damning about Trump and others. And we're talking about going beyond, sexual abuse. We're talking about rape in cases of girls, right? At one point, there's an allegation about girls being auctioned off with Trump being
Mm.
involved. Now, I emphasize the tips are unverified. You cannot say this establishes that Trump is guilty of this. There's a quick summary column where the FBI talks about what they did to follow up on these. Now, in a couple of cases, they claim they tried to contact the person that made the tip. They could not reach them. They claimed in a couple of other cases that they did follow up on us, but there was no, there was no substantial conversation. Then they talk about in a couple that there was a more substantial conversation with the person that made the tip, right? We know that at the end of the day, there was no prosecution based on these tips that has come out so far, right? And indeed, the spin last weekend, so this is a week after the documents come out, a few days before Bondi's appearance, the spin that comes out of the White House is, oh, the FBI made the conclusion, no grounds for prosecution, or justice made no grounds for prosecution. And of course, that was the line that Todd Blanche had made as soon as the documents came out a week earlier. All right, fine. You're going to tell me that. Here's what I want to know. If the FBI investigated these tips when they were made, and they might have been in 2013, they could have been in 2016, could have been in 2018, they could have been in any number of years. Where's the paper trail of the investigation of the tip? Not just the summary document that was done in 2025. Where's the paper trail about the specific tip? Let's take one, for example, that girls were auctioned at Epstein's estate, and Trump was involved. unverified, right?
Yeah.
Where is your paper trail in terms of FBI of who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, what was the substance of the conversation? And those documents will exist because you do not question someone and not have a written record of that. That's the whole point if you're an investigator, right? That you have it. So, yeah, those 3 million pages that have not been released, there's some. Now, I will add one other thing, and then we can get into Bondi because I've talked for quite a while. Legislators, a group of legislators were able to get in at the start of this week and start to view the files that had been released. And I need to emphasize, they only saw files that had been released. What they were doing in looking at those files that were being released is they were looking to see if, look, those names that have been redacted, can we get them unredacted, right? Which is why we got those 6 names that were publicly identified, including Les Wexner, the retail magnate. They were not allowed to see any of the 3 million files that have not yet been released. That needs to be emphasized. Secondly, 2.7 million documents. And they were given a total of 4 computers for all legislators, right? They can go in, they can take notes. They cannot take in electronic devices, they can take notes, right? But on only 4 computers, right? It's going to take many, many years to go through those 2.7 million documents and go through those redactions if you've only got 4 computers that you can work off of. Thirdly, and this is damning, and this came out at the Bondi hearing yesterday. My wife thinks Bondi deliberately did this. And if Bondi deliberately did this, this is stupid. She had a document in her hand, and we'll talk about what she was doing. She was armed with all kinds of basically notes to try to just simply insult legislators. But one of the documents she had, it was a record of the documents that the legislators had accessed. Effectively a search history, right? So the Justice Department were carrying out surveillance on the legislators in terms of what documents they were looking at. Why? Why would you do that, right? Now, again, I think we can speculate. I think Justice Department is trying to stay a step ahead of the to find out where the folks are going. You add all of that up, and I said this in December, and I will say this again. This is not transparency. This is not transparency first and foremost for the victims. This is a Stonewall. And although they have been forced into releasing some files with redactions, they are still stonewalling because, and I'll just give you the overall mantra here. If there's any American football fans out there, protect your quarterback, the guy that runs the team. And when you have political appointees rather than genuine investigators or independent officials who are overseeing this, and those political appointees were put in place by Donald Trump, their priority is to protect Donald Trump. Point blank.
And I think the thought I had as well, especially after watching yesterday, is that all of the speculation and frankly also some of the people that really disgust me are the apologists who would say that, oh, this is not really a cover-up, it's just mere incompetence. They would try to even attack Bondi herself. I mean, even though they are Republicans, but they were just attacking her that, oh, she's incompetent, she's just not very good at managing this thing, she's never done this before, blah 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 blah. And I think they were hoping that people would think, oh, because they're so incompetent, they don't know what they're doing, and there are far too many files, they can't manage it. You can't blame them. But I think everything that we've witnessed so far and everything that you've just highlighted, to me, that's not incompetence, that's intelligence. Right? Sorry, intentional. And there's intelligence behind that approach to, I think they made it intentionally look that, oh, we kind of screwed up, our bad. Whoops. We told you that there be 6 million files, but actually, no, it's 3 million. You don't need the other 3. Our bad. We got this wrong. And there's basically, there's a very thin line that separates incompetence and bullshit. And I think now it's starting to smell more and more and more like bullshit, and it's intentional. So,
Yeah.
so I think if anybody has any doubts that this is a cover-up, literally everything they just highlighted to me, that just screams cover-up to me. There's absolutely no way this is an accident.
Let's walk this back to connect this all the way up to where Bondi appeared yesterday. Go back to a couple of things I mentioned earlier, which is that the White House spin is that last summer, prosecutors had concluded there was no case that could be brought, right?
Yeah.
That will have meant that the Trump administration or officials in the Trump administration were going through those Epstein documents closely at that time. They didn't start going through the Epstein documents in November when Congress asked for them. Now, why is that important? It's important because remember that the Trump administration's line at the start of 2025, when they thought they could pin this on the Democrats, was, we've got the Epstein files. Look, we're going to bring them all out. Then by last summer, their public line was, there's no document. There's nothing here. There's no client list. There's nothing of substance here, right? So when Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, the FBI director, appeared before, I think it was Senate committees last autumn, they knew that the files were being processed. They knew that. But Kash Patel, who I think is a combination of incompetence and bullshit, to use your formula, he lied to the Senate committee. He lied and said, because they asked us, how many times has Trump been referenced in the documents? Has he been referenced more than 1,000? No. More than 500? No. More than 200? No. How many? I don't know, right? Well, of course, it turns out that even from, just the innocent references, if you want to call them that, in terms of the files that were released 2 weeks ago, Trump's in there thousands of times, right? So Kash Patel either is completely incompetent or he's a liar, or both, that takes place. Of course, Pam Bondi, when she appeared last autumn, and she kept saying, look, I never promised to release the files. I never promised them. We've reviewed them all, right? Yeah. Well, and I do think Bondi is competent. I'm on your line here. Bondi knows exactly what she's doing. She's stonewalling, right? She's stonewalling because they're still hoping they never have to release any of the files. They're still hoping. Now their feet get held to the fire because Congress, those 4 key Republicans in the House, made the difference. And we'll get back to them in a minute because they're still vital. And when those 4 Republicans join the Democrats and you get this vote in the House that says you've got to release, okay, well now they're sort of backed up. What are we going to do about this? Okay. Well, they keep holding off because they're supposed to release every single file they've got. They still haven't released half of them. And now you get Bondi who goes to this hearing, which comes up yesterday. And the reason, what you need to be clear about Bondi is Bondi was not there to answer questions. Okay? Bondi was not there to answer a single question.
It felt like a political campaign. She was just basically regurgitating the usual MAGA talking points. It wasn't even...
Not regurgitating. She had rehearsed everything. Look at this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all those papers that are in front of Bondi, right? Those are papers, most of which do not have any connection with Epstein. Most of those papers there, if you want to give the kind word for them, it's called opposition research. It's basically hit pieces that you use to go after people, your opponents. And so every time she gets a question from a representative, she's got like a photo of someone who's committed a crime in their district, quite often an undocumented immigrant. And she's got the notes written on the back of the photograph, and she'll hold it up because she knows. And let's wait. She knows cameras looking at her, so she knows she can get the photograph of the person there, and then she's got the notes that she can read. And she effectively is blaming the legislator. In fact, saying you're the reason why this person committed this crime, right? It's like, okay, well, I think probably every member of Congress has had an undocumented immigrant who's committed a crime in their district. So I think that's a pretty easy tactic to pull off. So that's why Bondi comes up there. There was that bizarre moment where she overreached in her preparation, which was like, where she said, why are you like criticizing? Why are you, this is a hit job on President Trump. The Dow Jones is more than $50,000. Well, okay.
Yeah, I remember. I was like, what the hell has that got to do with anything? Yeah.
I don't think the Dow Jones is $50,000. It's $50,000 50,000 points you're talking about, but you go on with that. And then she's going, the NASDAQ is up so much, and this is up so much. This is like an unprecedented budget. And then she say, and at one point, I mean, seriously, legislators were just laughing. They just could not believe how brazen this was, that she had decided, she had rehearsed this line of attack to get away from answering questions about Trump. And this is when she slips up. She goes, "Why are you laughing?" And I'm going, "Well, we all know why they're laughing." So she kind of slipped up in terms of the rehearsal. And I will tell you, the one point where I think that her rehearsed performance, she screwed up big time, because and we do need to get back to this. We need to get back to the actual evidence we know and don't know for the sake of the victims. But I will tell you that if you're talking about the political optics here, fortunately, the legislators who wanted to cut through this had prepared quite well as well. And these weren't all Democrats. This is also, Thomas Massie, the Republican out of Kentucky, who's vital here. Massie was one of the 4 who voted to get their files released. So they had those survivors that were up there. And Bondi said in her prep statement, "Oh, the FBI would welcome talking to all these people, yada, yada, yada." And so legislators on more than one occasion had them stand up and said, "How many of you all have tried to contact the FBI?" And all of the hands go up, right? How many of you have been contacted by the FBI to follow up on this? Not a single hand goes up. Right? How many of you, despite the abuse that you've taken, despite the risk and so on, would still like to talk to the FBI? Every hand goes up, right? And these were all women. And there's one male in there, and some people, some Trump defenders have tried to go, that's I think it's the twin brother, Virginia Giuffre. Again, the woman who committed suicide recently, who as a girl had been abused, allegedly, by Andrew, formerly known as Prince, and by other men. So there's a photo that's taken, and I wish I'd remembered to get the name of the person who took the photograph, because this photographer needs credit for this, because this, I think, will be an iconic photograph. In the background,
Sorry, I think I know which one you're talking about, because it went super viral, and I in preparation for this, let me see if I can share the screen. Because
later on in edit, I'm going to encourage you to use this as the cover photograph for when you do this in edit and post, because this is just like.
So let's see if people can see it.
Yeah, so that's great, Tim. There you go. And there you go. That's Virginia Giuffre's twin brother, who's at the right-hand side of shot in the background. And there are several other survivors you can identify. There's a few who are seated. There were about 11 who were in the room. Now look at Pam Bondi in the foreground.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not just Pam Bondi. And the legislators had asked Pam Bondi to look at the survivors. Look at these survivors, right? That's not just Bondi refusing to look at those survivors. That is her looking down at those rehearsed notes with almost an attitude of disdain.
Yeah.
That she has no responsibility to even acknowledge that the survivors are there. And I think that in a microcosm sums up the Trump camp.
Very much.
That they don't want to acknowledge them. And so we will have those political optics that'll play out over the next few days and so on. But I think what you have already seen is that Tom Massie, the Kentucky representative, came out after the hearing, and I actually should say during the hearing, Massie very effectively went after Bondi on a couple points, and I need to highlight one of them as well, because remember, the survivors. There's been a big to-do that while the names of possible perpetrators, including co-conspirators, have been withheld in these documents, the names of victims, survivors, have come out, right? Including other identifying information, emails, phone numbers.
Which is actually, sorry to interrupt, that was supposed to be illegal, because the law that even Trump himself signed off was said that the only redactions that are allowed are redactions, and not just allowed, they're allowed, and they must make sure that the names of all of the victims are redacted and nothing else is redacted.
Yeah.
So they've done the exact opposite, basically.
Yeah, they've done the exact opposite. What they flipped it. What they've done is their priority on redaction is to protect possible perpetrators, and the victims are secondary to that. Massey holds up a document. I didn't know about this until yesterday, and the document is an internal memorandum discussing whose names might be redacted. The FBI released the document of names that possibly should be redacted, and it's the names of the survivors. So, in discussing whether or not you should protect the survivors, they've outed them, right? Now, this is either just glaring incompetence or just not giving a damn, or both that takes place. Then Massey refers to, and he has the document that was initially redacted with the identities of several individuals withheld. I think these are the 6 individuals that Massey named. And then he says, let's unredact one of them because Massey saw the unredacted version, and one of them is Les Wexner, right? And that's a dramatic moment. And Bondi has got, I can't remember Bondi's comeback on it. She tried to insult Massey, some slur against him, the fact that he's not loyal to the press, yada, yada. But Massey came out after the hearing, and what's key here is Massey's not going to let go. I mean, and if anything, Massey's even more infuriated by the way that legislators have been treated this week. You know, because he goes in to see the unredacted documents under these conditions where you struggle to get anything from them because of the way they're making you work. Then he's getting absolutely no respect in the hearing from Bondi, nor any of the Democrats, of course. And I think as long as Massey doesn't let go, and indeed, I'll name a couple of others as well. There were 4 Republicans who joined the Democrats. Massey saw the document, saw some of the documents earlier this week, some redactions removed. Lauren Boebert, with whom I agree on no other issue in the world. She's the woman who was famous for, everybody comes into her cafe and totes guns out in Colorado, and a QAnon sympathizer as well. And now she's a representative, but she wants transparency on Epstein. She came out after seeing the documents and said, look, they are withholding from us, right? Nancy Mace, South Carolina, again, ditto. I don't agree with Mace on anything, but she has effectively reinforced what she said about transparency. And we know Marjorie Taylor Greene's not letting go of this. Yeah. So in no way have they checked, at least in the House, the Republicans who are siding with the Democrats. And remember that they only have a majority of 4 seats now. So they can't keep stonewalling this out of the House. And out of the Senate, it'll be interesting to see, whether some Republicans in the Senate begin to peel away. And I think they will. I think Tom Tillis in North Carolina, who's retiring, I think he's going to come out against Trump over this one. I think, in other words, as horrific as Bondi was yesterday, and I know we haven't gone into a lot of detail about what she did because, in part, I don't like talking about the noise as much as talking about the significance.
Yes.
As horrific as what she did yesterday was in terms of a political performance, I don't think it helped the Trump administration, the Trump camp. I think they're still in a world of trouble here because for all the attempts that, whether or not they're diversions or whether or not it's just Trump with his attention deficit disorder, or whether because of just their general chaos, whether they attack Iran, whether they go back to Venezuela, whether they go after Cuba, whether they ramp up ICE somewhere other than Minnesota. I don't think they can ramp up in Minnesota now because they've screwed up so badly there. Mm-hmm. I don't think Epstein drops out of the news agenda. That's the thing. Yeah. And if it stays there, it's going to be corrosive. Even if we don't get clarity on Trump and his associates in terms of the files.